it's basically Kristi Noem, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump decide if you protest whether you get to live or die in America. I mean, that's the America they've created.
It is on.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm talking to California Representative Ro Khanna, someone I've known for a very long time and debated with about a range of issues, including billionaires and their intent. They've turned on him because he's supporting a billionaire tax. I actually think it needs to be fixed a little bit because it's a little too much of a blunt instrument, which is odd because I'm usually telling Ro to go after the tech billionaires more strongly. Ro is always a good interview, so stick around. Representative Khanna, thanks for coming on.
Great to be back on. Happy New Year.
I'm going to call you Ro since I've known you for so long, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So we've got a lot to talk about. So let's start with the news roundup and dive right in. Last week, you visited the newest ICE detention center in California and said the detainees were treated like animals. Tell us what you saw.
It was honestly horrifying. Put aside what you think about the immigration issue. This is not how we should treat people in this country. I met with 47 detainees. Many of them I met with in a room without a warden or a security guard. These are not hardened criminals. Many of them have been in this country for years. They've been paying their taxes. And what they talked about was disgusting. They said that there was rocks in their food. One man, which stands out to me, had blood in his urine and said 7 days he had not been able to see a doctor. By the way, when we went by the nurse-doctor area, it was packed, about 50 people in a room the size of a modest kitchen waiting for an appointment to see someone to get health care. They said that there was the flu and other things spreading around in where they were being contained because they had no access to health care. They talked about shivering at night because some of them didn't have long sleeve shirts. They only went out 1 hour a day, and sometimes that was canceled. And they could not talk to their families. We saw the glass screening, the glass walls, windows that separated them. They said they were being treated, some said like animals, some said like murderers. I mean, I was embarrassed as an American.
So most of them were, as you said, they've been paying taxes. So what were they doing?
One of them was a business owner who had a construction business here for 20 years. One of them was a student actually studying and had gone in voluntarily for a ICE visit to show his paperwork and was arrested. It was interesting how many of them had actually cooperated with ICE or the detention centers thinking that they were providing their paperwork. Now, look, some of them admit that they were undocumented. They still weren't documented and had been here for years. But almost all of them were employed, were doing something. Some of them spoke perfectly fluent English. I mean, it was obvious that they had been here for many, many years. And even the people at the ICE facility knew that they weren't a threat. They wouldn't have had me sit in a room for an hour with no security guard, with no warden, with these individuals. I was more concerned about them being in tears breaking down than I was about my safety or the female staffer with me's safety. Part of the problem here is Stephen Miller has given a dictate, go arrest 3,000 of these folks every day who are undocumented. So they're cramping into these facilities. They don't have enough personnel.
Right.
And, he's dealing with it. It's a terrible
And we should
system.
mention this is a for-profit facility. And the more costs they save, the more money they make.
That's exactly right. It's Civic Corps. It's a for-profit. They have no incentive to hire more medical personnel, to get more clothes, to get more laundry. I don't think with the warden and the people around him, I don't think it was sort of intentional cruelty. It is just systematic neglect of a system where, okay, we don't have enough personnel. We're going to make the best of it. We don't have enough judges. And these are the procedures that we need to follow. But it's dehumanizing conditions.
What about the guards? Where are they? I mean, obviously, we'll get into the ICE personnel and their qualifications, but the guards themselves.
These guards were hired by Civic Corps, the company, and their security personnel. I didn't get the sense from any of the detainees that the guards themselves were abusive in terms of excess force. What they did say is, though, that they would have 2 hours a day, 4 times lockdown, where they all have to go back to their cells. They're all inspected. So 8 hours of your day is just being inspected. And what I got a sense of is just there was too little personnel for them to have any sense of human dignity. But in my interactions, no one said, "Hey, this security personnel beat me or
Right.
harassed me."
So you've called for Jonathan Ross, the ICE agent that who shot and killed Renee Good in Minneapolis, to be arrested and prosecuted. This seems more unlikely every day, but the FBI says it's investigating Good's relationship with local activist groups instead, in what could be a precursor to criminalizing protest. What's your advice to Americans who want to protest ICE or the Trump administration but are afraid of being targeted by law enforcement officers who face what appears to be no accountability?
My advice is be very careful. I mean, I saddened to say this, but if you're protesting ICE, if you're protesting this administration, you're taking a risk. And I deeply admire the courage of people who are willing to do that. You know, the hypocrisy, obviously, what's happening in Iran is of a different magnitude and horrific, where you have the Iranian regime basically shooting unarmed protesters with machine guns. But on the same breath, while we're condemning that, we're not standing up for protesters in our own country. I mean, the hypocrisy of that is stunning. But in this case, I looked at the video like many Americans many times. Obviously, that mother was protesting, and we can argue whether or not she should have listened right away to law enforcement. But does anyone think she should have been killed? That she should have paid with that with her life? When you look
Mhm.
at what she's doing with the
Yeah,
car,
just arrest her. Just arrest
they
her,
arrest her. The wheels are
or give
turned.
her a fine or whatever.
Yeah, the standard of force in this country is that force has to be a last resort and only what's absolutely necessary. And that's why I've said that he should be prosecuted and arrested and prosecuted. By the way, he can argue in that. I'm not saying that just put him in jail. He should have due
Mhm.
process. But when I look at that video, I think there are a lot of things he could have done short of killing her. He could have stepped aside.
Mhm.
He could have arrested her. He could have shot the tires. He could have shot other parts of the car. And you know, the fundamental problem here with ICE is that it doesn't report to the Justice Department. It reports to Kristi Noem and the Homeland Security. So in other law enforcement, FBI law enforcement, you have civil rights standards of conduct by the Justice Department, oversight, standards of the use of force, and you don't have that with ICE. You have no de-escalation training. There are advertisements out there basically for people saying, okay, come become an ICE agent. We've given them $150 billion, and they're acting like thugs in some of these places.
So what is the if it doesn't have accountability, it's a private police force essentially, is that for the president, correct? I mean, how do you characterize it?
Well, it's the president's police force. It's the Kristi Noem's police force, and they basically are being defended. I mean, for Vice President Vance to make this the issue that he wanted to pop up and opine about. I mean,
Explain what he said. Explain what he said for people who
They
might
basically
not have
said,
listened to it.
he does a press conference, which is highly unusual, right? Why are you
Mhm.
like suddenly going to speak to the entire American press corps? Obviously, he's the vice president. People are going to show up. And his whole conference is to say, I saw the video and I think the officer was perfectly fine shooting this woman and mom. And if you're going to protest or stand in the way of an ICE officer, then you're going to get shot. And it's a defense of that. I mean, there are two vivid images I have of J.D. Vance in this past year. One is lecturing Zelensky in Ukraine, and the other is
Mhm.
basically a defense of this ICE officer
Yeah.
in shooting this mom. And I,
He called her a deranged leftist, and of course, he has very little information. But obviously, they did that from the get-go. Kristi Noem started talking about before she had information. Same thing with Trump.
they have no information, and they're basically doubling down on this. They're basically saying we get to make the call in what we say is illegal. So we're the Congress, where we make the law. We get to make the call in how we execute it. We're the executive branch, and we get to make the call about whether it was legal. We're the judicial branch. It's
Mm.
all of the power in one. And who decides? It's basically Kristi Noem, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump decide if you protest whether you get to live or die in America. I mean, that's the America they've created.
So what happens next in this case?
In the case of this particular
Yeah. What?
ICE
Yeah.
officer, well, I think it depends on how much we all as Americans continue to demand accountability.
Hmm.
First of all, the statute of limitations is long. A
Hmm.
future administration
Yeah.
can prosecute, and that's something I think everyone in the Trump administration should be very aware of. I'm of the view, let's have reconciliation after Trump, but not reconciliation without accountability. The people who have violated the law are shooting boats in the Caribbean, who gutted U.S. aid, who aren't releasing the Epstein files, who are shooting protesters, will and should be prosecuted. But can we get it before the next 3 years? It's an uphill battle, but the public organizing, protesting, speaking out about it is our best chance. Look, Donald Trump is movable. How do we know that? He opposed my Epstein file with Massey, and then he signed it. Now he's suddenly out there proposing populist Bernie Sanders-like proposals. I mean, he called up Elizabeth Warren saying, support my credit card interest cap at 10%, stop private equity from buying up single-family homes. So he's gotten the message that he's losing on the economy, and I think he has not gotten the message that people are disgusted with what ICE is doing, but the more that people are speaking out, maybe it'll get through.
Yeah, Vance, just for people who don't know, says the ICE agent who shot Good has absolute immunity, so no accountability at this moment. So let's keep going and move from immigration to the economy. As you just noted, on Monday morning, you posted a video on X after the Department of Justice announced it was opening a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. In it, you said, quote, all Americans must stand with Jerome Powell and the independence of the Fed. The Trump administration has crossed a Rubicon. It seems like that's all they do all day is cross Rubicons. But why is this the point of no return? Because, like, I don't know. It seems like in the second, when you call for Americans to stand with Jerome Powell, what does that look like to you in practice?
Well, this is the point of no return because this is threatening America's money. I mean, this is going after America's wealth. I mean, I care about America's human rights and dignity, but everyone cares about America's economy. And you
Hmm.
basically are saying that we don't want independent monetary policy in America. Look,
Hmm.
I studied economics at University of Chicago. The key to getting a good grade on any exam is to recite saying inflation is always a monetary phenomenon, basically meaning that when you have people in a government who get to do whatever they want with the money supply for political ends, you destroy economies. And what Donald Trump is saying is let America go and be governed without any rule of law, without any independence, that whoever's in power can get just threaten monetary policy. It's the most dangerous thing for economic success. By the way, you don't have to take my word. Daron Acemoglu at MIT won the Nobel Prize for basically saying countries that are prosperous have rules of
Absolutely.
law and predictable systems. So that's why this was such a Rubicon in terms of America's entire economic system. And then, of course, you add the Trump flourish, which is basically threatens with criminal investigation anyone he disagrees
So
with.
why did he do this one? I mean, obviously, Janine Pirro is saying she did it by herself because they wouldn't write her back or something, some nonsensical
Oh, come on. Yeah.
excuse. I know, exactly. Why do you think he did this one? I mean, it's like an octopus. Every day there's another
I think there are two things.
ridiculous.
One, Trump is just very petty. If you're kind of not on his side, he will lash out against you. So I also I'm not even sure it's a grand economic theory that he has that he wants lower interest rates. I mean, I think that's part of it because he wants economic growth. But it's also just that who is this guy who doesn't recognize that I'm the two-term president, Donald Trump, who gets to capture
Hmm.
Madero, and like why is he
Hmm.
standing in my way? So I'm going to
Yeah.
show him. So I think part
Rid
of it
me
is
of this bothersome priest. That's, that kind of thing. You were just appointed the ranking member of the House Select Committee on China. You're less hawkish than Representative Raja Krishnamurti, the Democrat you're replacing, and you supported President Trump's decision to sell advanced AI chips to China. Talk us through your thinking on the chips. A lot of Democrats see this as a betrayal of our national security. Some Republicans do. That is prioritizing the commercial interests of tech and manufacturers like NVIDIA and AMD over American security. Talk a little bit about your thoughts on this job that you just got.
yeah. So first, I support industrial policy in the United States, including on rare earths. I've said, let's have a Manhattan Project so we're not dependent on China for the 17 rare earths. Let's make sure that we rebalance the extraordinary trade deficit where we allowed steel and aluminum and critical industries to be hollowed out. We should have them here. What I said on chips, and I, as you may remember, helped co-write the CHIPS Act with Senator Schumer and Todd Young, is that we want to have manufacturing capability of these chips here in the United States. Because of the CHIPS Act, like Gina Raimondo just said, 20% here. It will take place in terms of production. Now the question becomes, well, what about the sale of chips into China? And here it's a judgment call. I think even if you ask Gina Raimondo, she would say, well, look, we don't want to sell them the latest stuff because the compute power here is an advantage, but we want to sell them as much as we can up to that latest stuff because that gives our companies revenue, which they can then invest in the United States. And that makes China slower to have Huawei develop all their chips. Eventually, China
Mhm.
is going to get Huawei to develop their chips. So we're just buying some time. And the entire debate is, where is that line? I mean, Gina Raimondo may draw the line differently than Jensen, who may draw the line differently than me. But the question is, where do you draw the line? My view was that the president in okaying this latest round of chips doesn't cross the line of the most advanced chips. I still wouldn't sell the most advanced chips. By the way, it's unclear that
Why do you think that China and Huawei will stop developing its own chips if they can get advanced chips? Is that a logic that holds water?
Meaning, well, I think China's going to develop their own advanced chips anyway. I
Right,
think we're
correct.
just
That's my
slowing it.
point. Yeah.
We're trying to slow it down, and that makes sense to me in the most advanced chips. Like I would make sure we have at least a 1 year advantage over China in terms
Mhm.
of the most advanced AI logic chips. But I don't think ultimately we win the AI race by a bet that China isn't going to get the compute power with Huawei
Mhm.
to match
Or
us on
energy. Mhm.
chip production. I think we win the bet by making sure we have the AI talent here and the development of AI here. I also don't think we should replicate China's model of AI accelerationism. You know, what I say is, I'm not an AI accelerationist. I'm not an AI doomer. I'm an AI democratist. We need
So you're not
democratization.
a Zoomer, you're not a
Doomer.
doomer, you're a what?
Democratization, AI
Mhm.
democratization. What does that mean? It
Mhm.
means I'm not accelerationist. China is accelerationist, right? China is basically like, who cares that we have 19% youth unemployment? Who cares that the truck drivers are out of jobs? Tough. Like, we're just all in. AI, develop, develop, develop. And the tech folks in my district say, look, Ro, look at China. They're developing, developing, developing. You're talking about what are we going to do on jobs? You're talking about how we're going to
Mhm.
make sure that
Mhm.
we have safety. That's not what China's doing. I was like, you're right. That's not what China's doing, though they have more safety standards because of censorship. They're basically AI accelerationists. You want to live in
Mhm.
China? I don't. I don't want 19% youth unemployment. I don't want a
Mhm.
society where if you lose a job, tough. I don't want the kind of censorship that they have. I'm
What
also
do they
not an
say when you say that to them?
well, some say you're naive. The only thing that matters is America going to dominate in this new technology. Great Britain, the only reason they emerged as a great power is that they policy-wise chose to double down on the Industrial Revolution, and that's why they became this great power. I say, well, look, in the first 60 years of the Industrial Revolution, the working class didn't do well. They acknowledge that. They say, yeah, that's right. But Britain became the richest country in the world. America's competition is China. Do you want America to dominate or China? And if people like you are in charge, we're talking about AI democracy, you're going to give the edge to China, and we'll all be living in a China-dominated world. I mean, that would be the
Mm.
argument that
Yeah.
they make. I'm also not an AI doomer. I'm also not like,
Right.
this
Mhm.
technology
Mhm.
has no value. I mean, the technology has value. It can help cure
Right.
disease. It can help new small businesses. It can help renewable energy.
Although I'm not sure that's
Recreate.
the top on their list. They just wanna capture attention in a different way. I
Well,
know they say that, but I don't believe them.
By the way, the most interesting on the capturing attention, and I don't know how much you followed this, but I got educated about it recently. Have you followed this whole open social web movement? Basically,
Mhm.
the what Blue Sky is or Surf
Yeah.
is. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, here is now what I think is the top thing we need to require of these big
Mhm.
tech platforms. They need to be compatible with the open social web. They should
Mhm.
be required by law. If you're X, if you're Facebook, if you're TikTok, to be compatible with the open social web. What does that mean? Now I can take all my followers, all my contacts from those other platforms and construct my own social media graph where I don't have to have the algorithmic junk. To me, that
Mhm.
would be the most transformative thing. And we don't have to pass pages of laws. You just need to
Mhm.
require compatibility with the open social web.
So I'm going to pivot to the Epstein files because this is where, it's so funny because I was started wanting to talk to you about the Epstein file, but so much other stuff has happened, which the two major things obviously are the billionaire tax and the Epstein files. But let's start with the Epstein files because they have not delivered. They less than 1% or something like that. You and Representative Thomas Massey, a Republican, have been instrumental in forcing the release of the files. You've said in January it's going to be a bombshell month when we're find out some of the co-conspirators were. Talk about where we are right now with the release of these files. Obviously, Pam Bondi has been slow to do so, and how it's going to be a bombshell month if she drags her feet.
Well, the release has been woefully inadequate. You're absolutely right that they still have millions of documents. They're admitting to the federal judge in the Southern District of New York that they've got millions of documents. Thomas Massey and I just this week intervened with the Southern District of New York with an amicus curiae brief as a friend of the court saying, please appoint a special master so we can actually get these documents.
Explain why that's necessary first and how it would work, just so people
What the judge
understand.
would say is, uh, I'm going to appoint an independent person to determine what should be redacted, what shouldn't be redacted,
Mhm.
and I'm going to make sure that the release actually complies with the law, which the judge keeps citing.
Mhm.
I mean, they've got 2/3 of the Southern District of New York working on this. First of all, I don't understand with AI and all this technology why you need so many lawyers doing this. I mean, obviously you need a lawyer at the final review, but it seems the technology of the Justice Department could use upgrading. But if they really are going to say that it's such a national security or important issue to comply with Massey and my law, which I'm glad they're saying they're putting in the effort, then have a special master make sure that it's done right and done in accordance with the law. That's all we're asking the judge. The judge has been very fair as I've seen his decisions. I don't know him, never talked to him, but my trust, I think the country would trust him a lot more, frankly, than they trust DOJ or Congress. I mean, I'm not
Right.
asking Massey and I to be making these decisions. Have an independent judge. There are two revelations that came out that are really important, even off the 1%. One, and this is really critical, there are references to many, many more co-conspirators. Why is this important? Because the president says it's a hoax and it's all Jeffrey Epstein. Even some people in the Democratic orbit, oh, this is just Epstein and Maxwell. No, now we know there are a lot of other co-conspirators from the documents. And by the way, we know that those co-conspirators weren't charged. And there are prosecution memos out there that they haven't released explaining why they dropped charges on the co-conspirators. So that was one really important revelation. And when you talk to
Mhm.
the survivors, they'll tell you that they were told if you complain to the FBI or the police department, nothing is going to happen. So don't even do it.
So why should they now?
What I've said is they have already named these names in their interview memorandum to the FBI. They're called Section 302 statements. Basically, FBI agents sat with these survivors and their lawyers. We know from the survivors and from the lawyers they named specific men who either trafficked them or abused them, and that those names are in the 302 files. They have not released a single 302 statement. So I'm less concerned about all the millions of documents, right? They're kind of doing this document dump, which is
Mhm.
just let's just put out
Very
all this
typical.
stuff and
Mhm.
confuse everyone. There are three things we need to see. We need to see those Section 302 statements that are
Mhm.
the survivors naming names, right? That's what the
Mhm.
American people
So they
want to
don't
know.
have to, right,
Which
again.
which they didn't have to. They're in those statements, so they can't be asked to do it again publicly. They'd be subject to defamation lawsuits and threats. It's already in those statements. They need to release those names, those statements, which they have not done. The DOJ hasn't released any of them, and then they need to release the prosecution memorandum from 2007 and 2019, which talked about 60 counts against Epstein that were reduced to 2 counts. Talked about all the co-conspirators who weren't charged, and we need to
Mhm.
understand why there were decisions made to drop all of the investigation.
So where are we on that now, right now, with all this other noise, which, you could almost say everything is a distraction from these Epstein files in many ways. It feels like it with Trump. Um, what do you I feel like he'd be like Carol and Pluribus and drop an atom bomb if it would get him out of the Epstein files. What is in the way right now? What happens since they were ordered to do so, and that took you forever to get that to happen? What happens next?
Well, it really comes down to the next step to this judge and whether he will rule for a special master or not. Uh, we will see some of these millions of documents because the Justice Department has said to the judge they're releasing them. The question is the quality of that, and will they have excessive redactions? And then Thomas Massey and I are planning to introduce inherent contempt. Inherent contempt, if it passes the House, it just requires the House would fine Pam Bondi personally $10,000 a day for every document that she didn't release. Whether that passes and is enforced, the point is it's showing the crack in the MAGA base of all of the issues. And I don't
Yes.
fully understand why.
I said that very early to Scott. I was like, no, this is the bearing wall for all of them in many ways.
This is the issue that the MAGA base is livid over Trump on. Some of them agree with Trump on Venezuela. Some of them agree with Trump on ICE even. Some of them agree with Trump on his tax break bill. Some of them agree with Trump on what he's done in appointing Robert Kennedy. This is the one issue where the MAGA base has said, you promised us you would get these corrupt folks who raped and trafficked these girls. You aren't doing that. You become part of the system. And they are livid at Pam Bondi. And so this is why Trump is panicked about this, because he knows every day that this goes on, he's losing someone in his MAGA base. And this is why Massey and my inherent contempt against Bondi matters. If we just did impeachment against Trump or Robert Kennedy or something, it would be met with a yawn in the MAGA base. Bondi, Massey put out a Twitter poll. I get the vast majority, I think 70% wanted Bondi impeached, and the others wanted Trump to fire her.
What has to happen to get the rest of these files released?
I believe we need a strong decision from the judge, because
okay.
the judge matters in this case. I believe we need influential commentators like you not dropping it. I mean, their whole
we're not dropping it.
Well, that's been their whole strategy, that eventually people will forget. We need the courage of the survivors. They've come to the Capitol twice when things were stalling. We need their courage to be willing to continue to engage, because ultimately people may be intrigued that Massey and I are kind of an oddball couple, but they.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. Talk about that relationship. You're an odd couple, to say the least, but you've managed to work across the aisle at a time when almost impossible getting it done in Congress. He has really put his neck out there. I mean, in your case, it's not. It's still very brave of what you're doing, but for him, it's particularly
he's shown on this issue, there's far more consequence to him than there is to me politically. I mean, there's consequence anytime you take on big, powerful people, you ruffle feathers and it's easier to keep your head down. But for him, it's literally his seat in May. I mean, the president has put his entire apparatus. Think about this, what it takes to become president of the United States. That entire team is out there with their number one goal to defeat Thomas Massey in May. And Massey in private moments says, "Hey, if I don't come back, I don't come back." I mean, it's a real race. It's not. It's not. Okay, he's definitely going to win. He's got a clear path to win, and is up by 10, 15 points. But it's going to be a fight.
So what? Talk about that relationship with the two of you.
Well, he's got a dry sense of humor. He's one of the smartest people in Congress. He's an MIT grad. He's got a wicked sense of humor. We text a lot. He's the type of guy who reads footnotes, so he'll get energized by the most random things. He's newly married. I've gotten to know
his wife died. For people who know.
His wife died, who he was deeply close to. One of the most disgusting things Trump's done. I mean, he's obviously does a lot, but he insulted Massey for getting married to his new wife. We've talked about, his grief, the difficulty of that. We joke around about, when he went on his honeymoon. I mean, we've become friends. I mean, I see him on the House floor. We text. But we're also friends committed to work. Right now we were texting back and forth about Iran and when is the right time to reintroduce our Iran war powers resolution. Is it ripe yet or not ripe? Because right now the United States hasn't done anything, but Trump is threatening to do things. So a lot of our interaction is around substantive work, and that's what's built the friendship as opposed to the other way around.
Right. And Epstein, how did that come together? Very briefly, that idea of the two of you.
We were doing the Iran stuff together, actually, 6 months ago. We had done the war powers resolution. Massey and I have been doing that for years, and we partnered with that again on Iran. Of course, the strikes that Trump did only lasted a day. Fortunately, he didn't get escalated into a full-scale war. And so that issue was around the time that Pam Bondi says, well, there's nothing more to see. And I just introduced an amendment in the Rules Committee saying, well, why don't we get require the release of these files? Massey saw that there was one Republican, Ralph Norman, who voted for my bill. And Massey's a math guy. Like I said, he went to MIT. And he says, okay, in a Rules Committee about 12 people, if you lose one Republican, statistically in a Congress of 435, we'll probably be able to get 20, 30 Republicans. And so he called me up and he said, Ro, why don't we work on this together? When we started to work on it together, I thought this would be yet another valiant failed effort that Massey and I have led for 10 years. I didn't expect that we would actually get the kind of momentum where it would pass the House, pass the Senate,
Right, which you
the
did.
president would sign it.
You got all these people who were not necessarily strange bedfellows, we would say. So you talk. One of the things in the Epstein things, you call it. You talk about the so-called Epstein class, which you call elites that operate with impunity. There's a lot of impunity is everywhere at this point. And your quest to get the bottom what happened to Epstein is motivated, at least in part, by a desire to restore trust in government by showing that Epstein class isn't above the law, probably the same thing with ICE. Why is this case taken on such a symbolic resonance in this country? And what will it take to persuade voters that the government can hold elites accountable when they commit crimes? And I should mention Bill and Hillary Clinton are refusing to testify before the House Oversight Committee's Epstein investigation, and Representative James Comer is threatening to hold them in contempt of Congress, even as he's politicizing the situation in a really unprofessional way. Still, should they be forced to testify?
Well, there's one thing we still believe in, regardless of party in this country, and that is that you don't rape young girls and you don't abuse young girls. And I think the reason this has taken on such power is that sexual assault is far more common in this country than we realize. The amount of people since I've been doing this who stopped me at an airport or said to me, I was abused, I was raped, is more than I can count. And that it is so jarring that we allowed powerful financiers, powerful politicians, powerful world leaders to go to this island, abuse girls, watch 14-year-olds paraded naked, have this happen for years, and the country really didn't blink. And that there's something deeply rotten about the moral values that allowed us to do it. So, yeah, elites may evade taxes or elites may offshore jobs, but the American people didn't think that the elites were, for their own gratification, preying on young girls or turning a blind eye as young girls were being raped, and that was fine for our society. So that's why this idea of an Epstein class, if they could get away with this, what else are they getting away with? And if we can't hold them accountable for this, how are we going to hold the elites accountable for anything? And that's why it's resonating. That's why it's resonating with a lot of MAGA folks who believe the system is fundamentally corrupt and that there are two tiers of justice, and that that some of them who've served the country, been in the military, are committed to one set of values, and this elite governing class doesn't share those values. On Bill and Hillary Clinton, they should testify in front of the House Oversight Committee. They shouldn't avoid that. I will say that the politicization of it, though, is not right. I mean, they purposely just released Bill Clinton pictures to make that the story, as opposed to the victim's 302 statement. So release everything. And I think Clinton himself has said release everything, and release the Clinton pictures and the Clinton stuff, but release everything so you're not cherry picking. And fine, have the Clintons come and testify and have them testify under oath, but then also have Maxwell testify and others testify, like the people in the Epstein estates and people who were at Mar-a-Lago who were implicated and or named, and have it a much more broad-based inquiry. So the criticism of Comer has been the selective calling of the Clintons. There's no Democrat who believes that the Clintons should get a pass.
Right. Then last question on this topic. What is Trump so afraid of from your perspective? And should he testify? I mean, obviously he's not going to because he has absolute immunity. Maybe not on this. I'm not really clear. But what is motivating him here?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know what it is, because I don't think it's just him. I mean, I think people know that he was on these planes, and
He
it's
hung out. There's picture after picture
yeah.
after speaking of pictures and
So
videos, and they were friends. They
yeah,
were
and so
friends.
it's unclear to me that there's some smoking gun with Donald Trump himself of things that we don't already know about. There is just some powerful forces that he wants to protect. I mean, obviously, people who may be powerful donors, powerful interests. There's been speculation, are foreign governments involved? And I want to be very careful on that because there's nothing that I have seen that clearly corroborates it. On the other hand, there has been a fair amount of speculation from survivors or others that are there other things involved. And I would just cite Julia Brown, who's the best reporter on this, and
Julie
she's saying,
Brown. Hmm.
yeah,
I just texted with her today. That's fun.
and she
Yeah.
says there may be other governments involved, but there may not be. We don't know, but we need a full release so that
Hmm.
that we aren't engaged in conspiracy theories. But people look at this and say, this guy's meeting world leaders.
Hmm.
He's friends with all these powerful people around the globe. How is this happening? Who is he protecting? The transparency is what's needed.
Including himself. So I'm going to switch to another thing that I think you and I have talked about for years, and you kindly texted me and said I've come around to your way of thinking on this.
I
And
have. It
uh,
took me 10 years.
it did. I was always like, Ro, when you do something, I'm like, stop hanging out with these people. So we'll talk about this group of elites that also operates, what I think, with impunity, tech billionaires. Your support for the one-time 5% tax on billionaires in California is causing a lot of agita in Silicon Valley elite circles. So talk about how the tax work and why you're in favor, even though Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom says it would push innovators out of California. He has some argument to be made and lead fewer middle-class jobs and ultimately lower tax revenue. There is some proof of this in other countries. But talk about why you're for it in
Yeah.
this way and what shifted you.
Well, I've always been for a wealth tax. What shifted me though is I didn't realize the vehemence at which I would get disowned
Hmm.
and attacked, and
Hmm.
the slightest thing of suggesting a 1% tax
Hmm. 5%.
on billionaire wealth, and
Right.
I
It's a one-time 5%
one
tax.
point,
Correct.
but initially I'd suggested 1% a year, but it's 5%
Hmm.
over 5 years. But
Hmm.
the vehemence of the anger made me
Hmm.
text you saying, "Wow, I mean,
Yeah.
folks uh, are allergic to any sense of
Hmm.
increasing that kind of wealth tax." Now,
Hmm.
why did I say that we needed a wealth tax? Well, there there have been huge cuts in Medicaid to California. This is going to mean rural hospitals and services are going to close. This is going to mean millions of people are going to be without health insurance. This is going to mean hundreds of thousands of people in healthcare jobs, nurses and in other positions are going to be eliminated. People say, well, the SEIU union cares about their healthcare jobs. I said, yes, as if that's something bad. Isn't a union supposed to make sure care that hundreds of thousands of nurses and healthcare workers aren't laid off? Yeah, they're not hiding the ball. They're saying that this is why we're doing it, so we have healthcare in this country. And what I said is, at the same time, this bill gave tax breaks to very wealthy people, including billionaires. And so I said, okay, if we could have a 1% a year, but
Hmm.
5% over 5 years tax to make sure that people had health care, those are my values, and that's something I support. Now, I hear the concerns on some of the drafting. There are two provisions of it that I'm working to get changed, which is you should not be taxing founders on the voting shares that they have because that's not real wealth. And there's back and forth of whether that would count as a wealth or not. But that is something I don't support. If it's 5% of your own your stock, and then you have 50% voting rights, and that needs to be redrafted. And there's the second provision, which is what do you do if you're illiquid? And there needs to be provisions for that. But that's been my position, that you can keep the innovation engine if you fix those two provisions, and you can still have a 1% tax. By the way, 72% of the billionaire wealth in California is in public stock, so you can get to a lot of it
Yeah,
with fixing those two.
I think to me, it's interesting because I was like, ugh, maybe not this way. Scott and I sort of support an overall tax overhaul, but it'll take longer, right?
Yeah.
An AMT tax that just handles it, and I think what it is, it specifically targets about 100 people, I think it is, who are threatening to leave California, except for Jensen Huang, who's apparently staying. I have of two minds of this. One is, uh, you made and I said it to one this weekend. I said, you made all your money in California, you ingrateful piece of shit. You could figure out a way to pay more taxes, and we deserve the taxes from you, given you made your wealth here. The second thing is, yes, there are different ways to do this, but the length of time it would take and the kind of vehemence you would fight whatever happens means nothing would happen. So why don't we just do shock and awe at this point? Because you don't seem to be, availing yourself to thinking that you owe your state something more, which they don't think that at all.
They don't. They think that that there's waste and that there's abuse, and there is some waste. I'm not going to say everything we've been spending is perfect, but the point is you have a real crisis here with people not having health care, and a lot of even they will acknowledge this. That this is not. Okay, now we're taxing them a second time. A lot of what happens is someone makes $1 billion. They end up saving that money. They don't pass it down until they die, and they're not paying tax on any of that appreciation for years because they're not realizing the gains, and they're not getting a standard income. And this is an actual issue. Now, some of them say let's tax the loans on the assets. That's a reasonable suggestion. So when Elon borrows against his estate to go buy Twitter, that would be a realization event. You can that's a clean way of doing it. There are people who have constructive suggestions, and the people who are pointing out the illiquid issue or the founders' voting rights issue is a reasonable. But the sense of like,
How
I don't
dare
want to
you,
pay.
sir? Yeah. How dare you, sir? Question
Yeah.
my genius. I hung the moon. So every episode we get an expert question, and I found a plutocrat for yours. Steve Ratner, the chairman and CEO
Oh,
of
I know
Willett
Steve.
Advisors, LLC, the economic analyst on Morning Joe and contributing writer, New York Times op-ed page. Let's hear it.
Hi, Ro. Just in terms of this wealth tax idea that you've been pushing, I think we all agree that wealthy people don't pay enough taxes. But regarding the wealth tax itself, I would ask you, one, does it make sense to do this at the state level, given the ability of people to leave the state, as seems to already be happening to some degree in California? And secondly, as I'm sure you know, a number of European countries, I think 12, have tried wealth taxes. Only 3 still have them. Is that really the best way of getting people at the top to pay their fair share, or is some other form of taxation a better idea?
It's a thoughtful question.
It
First
is.
of all, I think that we should have it at a federal level. There's a constitutional challenge at the federal level. You have in the Constitution that you can't have a disproportionate burden on a particular state in terms of revenue. The 16th Amendment got around that for income tax. It's unclear what the constitutionality will be on the wealth tax. I think it's constitutional, but I support it at a federal level, and it would be easier to administer at a federal level. At a state level, I like the idea. Like I said, the cleanest idea is to have loans taxed on a state, and if we're going to do it at a state level, doing it maybe 1% a year on public stock, not having the founders' shares is a reasonable way to do it that I don't think is going to lead to significant exodus. So, but the directional point is that billionaires, in my view, can pay more so that people have health care, child care in this country. I call it an anti-revolution tax. I call it a sense of shared prosperity. I acknowledge that there are design challenges. Anytime you do something, there are design challenges. So why don't we work to fix those design challenges? I've offered to convene some of the tech leaders with some of these labor leaders and do something that gets everyone on board, and that's what I'm working towards.
So in that regard, one of the knocks on you has been, which I knock you for, is you've been everything to everybody. Like, you're super friendly, and I'm like, don't be. Both a Bernie Sanders populist and a former tech lawyer who courts Silicon Valley initially supported Doge, and what did I tell you about that? But nonetheless, but you seem to have planted your flag firmly on the side of populists now with this. And in response, except for Jensen Huang, tech elites are now reportedly bankrolling a primary challenge against you. Obviously, that's not the half of it. They trip over themselves to flatter Trump. As I wrote in Burn Book, it was capitalism after all. That was the first line in the book. What do you make of these challenges to you? This sort of indignancy. I've gotten several indignants at you, and I just tell them to shut the fuck up and pay your taxes. But were you surprised by the image, and what are you going to do about it? It
No, I
is your
was surprised.
district. It is
I
your
mean,
district.
I was surprised, but I've always been a progressive capitalist, and people on both sides or especially, yeah, I'm friendly. I grew up in Bucks County. That's my demeanor, temperament. But it's not just friendliness. What I'm trying to articulate is a slightly different vision. I'm all for entrepreneurship and innovation and wealth generation. I just think that that prosperity needs to be shared. That everyone needs to have a stake and benefit in it. So sometimes the people who are progressive get suspicious because I celebrate entrepreneurship, and
Hmm.
now the entrepreneurs and founders have been suspicious because I'm saying no. We need to be able to tax this
Hmm.
extraordinary wealth because workers aren't making out. But ultimately, if you ask me what is the fundamental challenge in this country, it is income inequality and the wealth
Yep.
divide, and people who don't have a basic amount of money to buy a house or health care. And so when those two clash, even though I'm trying to articulate something that's pro growth progressivism, when they clash, I'm going to be on the side of working class folks and middle class folks. And, yeah, it comes with political costs, as people have
Yeah.
seen.
Do you
And
think you think you were
you know,
naive to think they cared about income inequality?
well, I thought there'd be more people like Jensen. I
Hmm.
honestly, I thought there'd be more people like Jensen who'd just be like, okay, we paid. And then what I thought they would do is engage in a argument and debate and say, hey, Ro, one criticism that was fair on me, where I said, I said 1% over a year. They said, no, it's 5% over 5 years. And I corrected the record. And that's fair. If I'm going to articulate a position, you should know all the facts. I didn't read the careful, provision on the founder stock, even though they say it can be converted. I think that part has been poorly drafted. I should have, I thought there'd be a debate like that. And then we'd have a debate on ideas. What I was surprised by with the vehemence with which they just said, "No, this guy's progressivism is something that we think is going to hurt and kill Silicon Valley." And I don't believe that. I'm very proud of the innovation of Silicon
Hmm.
Valley, the entrepreneurship of Silicon Valley. Proud to represent it, but ultimately, I believe in shared prosperity, and for my district, for the state, for the country.
Are you worried about them getting you?
Well, look, there's so many people who have tougher problems than
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
than than, than I do in terms of my career, my platform, my politics will be fine. But do
Yeah.
I do I look? There are two types of politicians, and both are reasonable models. One type of politician just kind of keeps their head down, keeps climbing
Hmm.
up the ladder,
Hmm.
doesn't make much waves, takes positions that their party takes. And I'm just not built that way. I take risks. I put ideas out there. I think that the fundamental issue is the income divide, and I don't mind offending powerful people, whether it's defense contractors, whether it's pharma, whether it's billionaires. People used to say, "Don't pick a fight with those who write for a living," and now the motto is, "Don't pick a fight with the billionaires." I picked a fight with the Epstein class. I picked a fight with the billionaires. That's who I am.
Let's talk then about the future of the Democratic Party. Let's finish up talking about this. Elizabeth Warren gave a speech this week where she outlined her vision for the Democratic Party. In a nutshell, she said Democrats have to stop selling out to billionaires. And she called out tech billionaires like Mark Andreessen, even Democratic billionaires like Dustin Moskowitz and Reid Hoffman. Talk a little bit about how you're looking at where Democrats position themselves and you yourself. How do you position yourself in relation to other Democrats?
The central challenge for our time is wealth inequality and the fact that 70% of Americans don't believe in the American dream. I represent a district that has one third of the national wealth, $18 trillion. Every time I say that, they say, Ro, you didn't build the wealth. I don't claim to be building the wealth. I'm just saying there's an ecosystem of Stanford, of Berkeley, of entrepreneurship, of wealth generation that has $18 trillion. And yet the places where I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, folks are wondering whether they're going to get a good paying job. They're wondering how they're going to afford a house, how they're going to get childcare. The Democratic Party should have a simple mission, which is the economic independence and success of every family who feels left out of this economy, and an understanding of this AI revolution that's coming, so it works for all of us, for the entire country, not just for
Right.
a few billionaires.
Hmm.
That's where the Democratic Party's core mission should be, and that to me is the
Is
central
the
theme.
winning message for the midterms, particularly because that needs to be won, presumably, by the Democrats. It's kind of an all or nothing situation.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think that's the substantively right vision for the country. For the midterms, I think it can be simpler, which is Donald Trump cares more about Venezuela than he cares about Pennsylvania, Michigan. He spent all his time getting us into these overseas wars and giving money to
Hmm.
Argentina. What has he done to lower prices? What has he done to actually make your life better? And by the way, he's got an ICE agency that's rogue. One thing, Kara, that people don't understand fully and I think has been a lot of misinformation. Kamala Harris got the same number of white votes as Barack Obama. What she lost in white men, she made up with in white women. So how did she lose? Well, the Latino community moved away from us compared to Obama. The Asian American community moved away from us compared to Obama. The African American men particularly moved away from us compared to Obama. A lot of those groups are coming back home. Partly Trump has insulted every country in the world,
He
all that
has.
have diasporas here. So some of those folks are moving back to us. The ICE stuff has been horrible. His not being able to deal with prices has been horrible. We can build back that Obama
Hmm.
Bernie coalition in 2026, and I do think we have a chance of 20 to 30 seats, and Hakeem will be speaker.
So let's do a quick lightning round of short, quick answers, if you don't mind. Should progressives primary more centrist Democrat incumbents like Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez in Washington and Representative Dan Goldman in New York?
I'm for progressives running, and I have no problem with primaries. I'm not going to speculate about particular people, but I have been always of the view I ran a primary to beat my candidate. I think it's a democracy. There are some people trying to primary me. I've had primaries many cycles. I mean, what's wrong with that? Isn't that democracy?
Exactly. So you've called for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to step down. So have I. Explain why and who should replace him.
He just is not effective as a bold voice in standing up against the lawlessness of Trump. What for me the final straw was when we had these big wins in November, and then a week later he says we're no longer going to fight to get the Affordable Care Tax credits
Hmm.
extended, and basically greenlit a bipartisan group that cut a deal without getting the health care extended. If you're not going to fight for that, what are you going to fight for? But the second thing is just, look, Chuck Schumer and I have worked together in the CHIPS Act. He's had a lot of achievements in his career, including the IRA, CHIPS, other things. But when you look at him, does that inspire
No,
you to think
he's very,
that's
very
the
upset.
future of America?
Yeah,
Come on.
he's
I mean,
very, very
anyone being
upset.
objective looks at Chuck Schumer and you think, really? Well, you've been there for 50 years.
Yeah,
Come on, give someone
yeah,
else a turn.
yeah.
Uh,
Who? Who?
and I think it's a selfishness that has people cling to power that long, like
Hmm.
that, and that is why they have contributed to a breakdown of trust in America, to a breakdown of trust in the governing class.
Who would you like
And
to see in that job?
well, I mean, it probably hurt them given that I called for Schumer. But I like what Van Halen is out there saying. I like Chris Murphy. I like Lisa Blunt Rochester. I like a new generation of folks who are out there, who are visible
Hmm.
in leadership roles. I don't know if that's what they want. I don't know if what they want to
Hmm.
run for, but I want those type of folks to ascend in our party.
So what about House Minority Leader Jeffries? How do you rate the job he's done so far? He's very affiliated with Chuck Schumer. Has to be, obviously. But
Well, I have a different opinion. I think he's been effective in a number of ways. I can point to concrete ways where he has been effective. He just got the Affordable Care Act tax credits extended in the House. We got 4 Republicans who came to our side to vote for that bill. He is much more energetic, in my view, on television around the country. He has no fear of empowering other people in the caucus to be out there, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm on TV arguably as much as he is, as is
Right.
AOC and Jasmine
Mhm.
Crockett and
Mhm.
Robert Garcia and many others. So when people look at the House of Representatives, they see all of the talent, and that's a choice. I mean, that you could be a leader who clamps down on that, and Hakeem's not like that. So I think that the people are unfairly tough on him. In my view, he's done a good job. He's also hasn't been there for 50 years.
Right.
Give the guy a chance. He's going to be
Right.
speaker. Let's see what he can do.
So would you ever run for House leadership?
I'm flattered that people say that, but I wouldn't be effective there. I'll tell you why. I'm too independent. I don't do things by committee. Could Hakeem just come out and say, "Yeah, I think we need a wealth tax"? No, he's got to think about 218 districts and poll people and see what the consensus is. I'm in this because I have ideas. I have a direction where I want to move the
Yeah.
country, and I and so it would constrain me. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
what
You
people like about me wouldn't be the case if I
let me
was in
give you a
that
line.
position.
Say you're a bad employee. That's what I say. I say I'm a bad employee. That's why I don't work for people. I work for myself. Just say I'm a bad employee. Bad at listening. But what about the presidency? Obviously, people talk about you, either they love it or they're like, he's too thirsty for it or whatever. I don't think, I think anyone running for president is thirsty. So I discount that if you don't.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I want to be part of the national conversation. I don't apologize for ambition. I think, frankly, we need more ambition. Like Lincoln's ambition, they said, had an engine that knew no rest. It has to be ambition for the public good. What I do have is a belief that we need a much more ambitious Democratic Party, a party that believes in transformation for an agenda that has failed working and middle class folks. And I have a vision. It's called New Economic Patriotism,
Mhm,
21st Century Marshall Plan for America. How we're going to get the economy going in every part of this country, how we're going to make sure the economy isn't just
mhm.
working for a few tech billionaires, for everyone. And I certainly want to be part of the national
So
conversation. It
that's a
takes a
yes.
lot.
That's a
Well, no,
yes.
it takes a lot to run for one of
Mhm,
those things, and you have to talk to family and others. I mean, I'm
mhm,
not, there are probably 20 names out there. My guess is half of them will end up doing it and half won't.
mhm.
And my guess is probably no one really deeply knows even until that moment. But do I
Why
want to
do
be
they
part
take
of?
so long? Why shouldn't someone just announce? Why wouldn't you announce right now and say, and by the way, I'm going to have a Nuremberg-like trial for the Trump officials when I get in or something very bold.
Yeah.
That
Well,
was
I
one
do
of,
believe we need a trial for the
yeah.
officials who committed war crimes. Well, but one, because it would distract from the focus of the House. Like, I genuinely think, it's like tennis. If you start worrying about winning the set, you'll lose the point. And we definitely need to be focused on winning the House. And secondly, like, who knows what the moment is going to call for, right? I mean, if we have some incredible war, awful war or something, maybe my skill set isn't the right skill set. If what the issue is that we've got a digital AI revolution and a lot of people are being left out, and we need to make sure that someone's going to stand up to billionaires to make sure everyone is participating
You're the
in
guy.
that, then I'm the guy.
Yeah.
But how do we know that
Yeah.
until the moment comes?
Right now, Gavin Newsom's in the lead because of his sort of
He is.
pugnacious personality, which is he's really vaunted himself to the front in just recently, especially being anti-Trump.
Yeah.
He's California governor. If you didn't run, is that someone you'd support, or are you just you're still in a wait
No,
and see?
I'd see someone. I'd support someone who's more progressive. I mean, even I know he's uh, out there. I think sort of in a Bill Clinton like philosophy. I like Kevin. I endorsed him twice, but I just don't think that's the direction the party needs to go. I think the party needs to go in a more Bernie Sanders populist vision, FDR for the modern age.
As the party looks towards 2028 and it looks to win back some of the men and rural voters that have abandoned it, on what social and cultural issues should parties show flexibility? Abortion, trans women in sports, gun control, something else? Or is it better not to compromise? I did have a really interesting interview with Sarah McBride, who I think is a fascinating public figure,
Oh,
which
she's brilliant.
she brilliant. She was talking about having uncomfortable allies, and that's okay. She's managed to decenter the issue of trans, despite being a trans woman, and doesn't think what she thinks matters is affordability, right? Let's not double down on everything. I don't think it's not to make them mad. I think she thinks it's other things are also important. What is your take on it?
Well, Sarah, I think, is a classical liberal. She believes that she doesn't have a monopoly on the truth, that you engage in persuasion and conversation, and that people may have different priorities. My view is you don't compromise or abandon your values. So I don't think that you compromise on abortion rights or trans rights or LGBT rights, but I think we lead with issues about the economy, issues about working class having a fair shot, the economic issues that can bring us together, and we make it clear those are the highest priorities, while that we're not going to abandon our values in for the trans community or other communities. I also believe that you can have these conversations with respect and
Mhm.
not just call someone
Homophobe
a
or
racist if they think that the H-1B visa program was abused, but
Mhm,
to sit there and say, okay, what do you believe and why do you believe this? And here's what I believe,
mhm.
and to have a patience of engaging in in good faith. And to the extent that you were kind enough to call me friendly, I think it's my upbringing in a 99% white Bucks County,
Mhm.
watching Phillies games, Eagles games, where I grew up with folks. And
Yeah.
people aren't perfect, and I'm not
Right.
perfect, but there's a friendliness,
Yes.
a sense
No,
of
I
non-judgmental.
admire it. But I was telling you these are bad people, and then they were bad people. So I was warning about bad people, not people that you should have discussions on with. I agree with you on that one. It's just some people, it's not going to work because they don't care about poor people. They don't care about anyone but themselves. That was my point. And they're heinous people. That was what I was trying to get through to you. But by all means, talk to people who you have. You should. I feel you should have flexibility on divisive social issues. At the same time, there's a point where you're like, no, we're not going to do that. So, last question. The running thread through this conversation has been the lack of accountability. If a Democratic wins presidency in 2028, what's the most important step that a person should take to change this culture of impunity, which Trump so absolutely represents and said from the beginning, I could shoot someone in Fifth Avenue and get away with it. He wasn't kidding. So talk about that as my last question.
Start with a pledge for accountability. Day one, release all the Epstein files that Trump wouldn't have released, and make sure that you're prosecuting anyone who was engaged in the cover-up, and you can. Prosecute people who were engaged in orders to shoot boats where there was not a consideration of civilians there, or where you were being shooting even though people were helpless. Prosecute people who engaged in cutting U.S. aid, killing people in Africa, a violation of the Constitution. Prosecute people who may have stolen data at Doge, or done things that were in violation of congressional law. Make sure you know that, yes, you want to reconcile and bring this country together, but it's not going to be kumbaya, where if you got away with things, we're just going to turn away and say, no big deal. That we are going to hold people accountable for the crimes they committed in our democracy, and the crimes they committed to the American people, because for too long, people just say, okay, the rich and powerful, they just get away with everything. And so I think having an accountability culture, and making that clear from day one, that's our intent. And I have a more of a inspiration of people like Dr. King. I mean, my grandfather, as you know, was part of Gandhi's independence movement. He went to jail for 4 years. There was a sense of seeing the best of humanity, of forgiveness, of moving on. But that doesn't mean forgiveness and decency without justice. One can have justice and then redemption and reconciliation. But the Democrats need to be clear that it will be justice. It will not be retribution. It will not be, let's just take it out on anyone who supported Trump, or worked for Trump, or was part of MAGA. A lot of them are as angry about the system as we are. They thought that Trump would be the person to deal with it. And if they were let down or misled, then they should be part of a new coalition. And the people who actually committed the crimes, who misled them, who violated the laws, they're the people who should face justice. So huge difference between justice and retribution, in my view.
So very last question. Do you think Donald Trump will face justice for any cryptocurrency,
I mean,
whatever?
so far he's managed to escape and gotten 2 terms and whatever billions of dollars his family is worth. That'll be the decision of a Justice Department. I have a lot of respect for Merrick Garland as a jurist. I don't think he was the right pick for that role at that time. I think in some sense, Willie Brown was in San Francisco, said, they should have had Kamala Harris in that role as Attorney General. So this is not to diminish the Vice President Harris, but in terms of that prosecutorial intensity with fairness, that's who we need in our Attorney General, and someone who's going to take
She'd
that.
make a great Attorney General still. She still would.
She would. We'll see if she'd do it.
Yeah. I don't know.
She may have other plans.
She might. Anyway, I really appreciate it, Ro. I enjoy our relationship and over the long term, and I really appreciate you taking time.
I
here.
appreciate you.
All right.
And you were more right about these guys than I was. So.
I'll tell you what I think next.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Karen.
Today's show was produced by Christian Castro-Russell, Michelle Alloy, Megan Burney, and Kaylin Lynch. Nishat Kurwa is Vox Media's executive producer of podcasts. Special thanks to Bradley Sylvester. Our theme music is by Trackademics. If you're already following this show, you get a tax break. If not, that's a 50% tax for you, but just the Google guys. because those strange twins owe everything to the state of California. Thanks for watching. See you on Monday.